India says Kashmir is returning to normal, but those on the ground say the region remains almost paralyzed. I'm Imran Garta, and today on the Newsmakers, we ask what's next for Kashmir. Former US President Bill Clinton called Kashmir the most dangerous place in the world, and that was 20 years ago. Today, the most militarized zone on the planet is in the middle of yet another crisis. On August the 5th, India stripped Kashmir of its special status. It went from having the freedom to make its own laws and having its own constitution to living under lockdown. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi says the decision will rid Kashmir of terrorism. But in the last 2 months, activists say at least 10,000 boys have been arrested, food and medicine are in short supply, and the army has been accused of torturing Kashmiris. Well, earlier this week, I spoke to India's ambassador to Turkey, Sanjay Bhattacharya, and he painted a very different picture.
We have seen great jubilation on the streets in Ladakh and Jammu and in various parts of Kashmir Valley as well.
But you've said 90% of the valley have no restrictions and life is returning to normalcy. Do you take that back?
I don't, of course not. That's what is actually on the ground.
Joining me now from Islamabad is Chaudhry Fawad Hussain. He's Pakistan's Federal Minister for Science and Technology. From New Delhi, we have retired Indian Army Colonel and journalist Ajai Shukla. And in London is Muzzammil Ayyub Thakur. He's the president of the World Kashmir Freedom Movement and the executive director of the Justice Foundation. Good to have you all on the program. Muzzammil, let's start with you. I know you watched the entire interview with the Indian ambassador to Turkey. Was there anything in there that made you think, hey, okay, maybe the man has a point. Maybe India's position here is more benevolent than I initially thought?
Out of everything the Indian ambassador said, there is only one point that I will concede. That he mentioned that the Indian government and the Indian forces do not target their own civilians, they do not target their own people. And that is absolutely true, because the people of Kashmir are not Indians. The Indian government, the Indian forces inside Kashmir are illegal aliens, and that is the only point that I will concede. The BJP, he is a representative of the BJP and the RSS agenda. Their entire idea is to bring about a Hindu nation, a pan-Hindu nation, not an Indian nation. Not necessarily by nationalism, but it is not enough to be an Indian, they must be Hindus. They idealize Hitler, for God's sake. And this is the definition of a fascist, neo-colonial, imperialistic ideology. People that are trying to maintain this kind of occupation inside Kashmir, despite the human development indicators inside Kashmir being better than those even in Gujarat. So when they talk about development for Kashmir, it's complete nonsense. There is not a single point other than the fact that we are not Indian citizens. That is the only fact that I will concede to. Nothing else he has said has made any sense. If he is genuinely serious about the facts inside Kashmir, he mentioned to you, Imran, and he accused you of not having ever been gone to Kashmir, and therefore that you have no right to talk about Kashmir. I will personally invite you to Kashmir and the entire TRT team to take them to the ground for a fact-finding mission. I will, on my own expense, no less. However, we know that this is never going to happen. India will never allow it. They don't allow international aid agencies. There is a military observer group that are limited in their work. The MSF, the Doctors Without Borders, even they are limited. If Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the opposition, is not permitted to go around and see what is happening in Srinagar and the wider areas of Kashmir, what chance does any international media have?
Okay, so let's have a listen to exactly what he said about media restrictions, or from his point of view, no restrictions on media. Let's have a listen.
There are no restrictions on travel to Jammu and Kashmir. Are you aware that there is regular media reporting from Jammu and Kashmir?
And the Indian government says BBC is biased when the BBC reports on things that it doesn't like.
Well, Alt Media found out that the recordings used by BBC were actually from some other place. So
can I go? Can I go? Can I go?
Everyone is welcome. As I said yesterday, my Home Minister was on record saying that you're all welcome.
Ajai Shukla, has the Indian ambassador boxed himself in there? Because is it likely that they're going to allow me to freely visit the valley and see what's going on the ground? Or is the reality that there are severe restrictions on the under the people and the media right now?
Well, that depends on what media you're referring to. Indian media is by and large allowed to go and cover, but I find that there's a significant degree of self-censorship going on over here. People are interpreting things in manners that are not strictly correct. That doesn't, of course, go for all of the media. There are a lot of reports coming out from the ground by Indian journalists that paint a reasonably accurate picture of the severe restrictions that the Kashmiri people are under. But for foreign media, yes, there is a process of getting permissions and sanctions and so on. And the government knows how to drag on that process in order to make sure that they don't actually get to go in a reasonable time frame. They are boiled down in getting permissions. Once they're over there, they're sort of there are restrictions placed on their movement and so on. So there's a sort of drag imposed on the foreign media. But yes, there is, strictly speaking, there is media reportage going on. Not all of it very good, but there are also, it has to be said, lots of Indian journalists who are reporting accurately and bringing out the gravity of the situation on the ground in Kashmir.
Okay, before I open this up to all of you reacting and responding to each other, I want to have a final listen to one more little chunk from the interview regarding terrorism and the accusation against Pakistan. Let's have a little listen to the ambassador again.
One of the inhibiting factors for Kashmir's development was really cross-border terrorism. So that had to be addressed as well. The number of troops or security forces in a place is dependent on how many you need to protect the interests of your citizens.
600,000.
The numbers are not really very relevant. What is important is that you need to protect the rights of your people. India is a country which is made of the people. And we will make sure that they have the ecosystem.
You're protecting which people from which people?
As I said, there is a very strong, marked influence of cross-border terrorism in Kashmir. And we are, of course, also a border state. So the numbers of troops is related to these two situations. We believe that terrorism denies human rights, and in order to protect human rights, we will have to have troops over there.
Fawad, Hussain, Pakistan's the problem. Cross-border terrorism. That's why India needs to do what it's doing right now. The view from New Delhi and the view from India's representative and ambassador is the root of the problem is Pakistan inspiring, training, funding militants to commit acts of terrorism. That's why they need to sort this out. Address that for me.
Yeah, first I would like to welcome the statement by Indian ambassador that you are most than welcome in Indian occupied Kashmir. And I will request you to please do apply for the visa.
Yeah, we're going to follow up.
And we will see that will they allow you to roam around in the Kashmir and that. And this will be, I mean, one of the big favor that can happen actually to the people of Kashmir. As far as, the people in Kashmir are concerned and the Pakistan sponsorship is concerned, you see, the test is very evident. Just look at the leadership of the Kashmiris that is behind the bar. There was a set of the leadership that was before this Article 370 was not towing Delhi line. People like Yasin Malik, Manzoor Gilani, Mir Waiz Umar Farooq, all were behind the bars even before this 370. Now, what happened in Indian occupied Kashmir? The people who were towing Indian line, Mehbooba Mufti, Umar Abdullah, Junaid Mattu, each and every leader of Kashmiri, each and every Kashmiri leader is behind the bars now. So what really they meant? That the whole population of Kashmir is actually sponsored by Pakistan. So tell me one voice, even at the level of the local representation that actually support Delhi line. There is not a single political leader in the whole of Indian occupied Kashmir that actually advocates or support Prime Minister Modi's line. Fact of the matter is that Prime Minister Modi is representing RSS. RSS was a party that was banned by Jawaharlal Nehru for the murder of Mahatma Gandhi. and they are trying to impose a Hindu fascist regime in India. And they did this successfully in Gujarat when he was chief minister. 8,000 Muslims were slaughtered there. The whole of Europe, the whole of USA actually banned Prime Minister Modi from getting their visa, and he was under the visa ban regime for a long time.
Fawad, wouldn't Pakistan have more credibility if it says, you know, while India might have all that stuff going on, we also can acknowledge that when you have a suicide bomber who pledged allegiance to Jaish-e-Mohammed and blew up 40 people, that group historically has been supported by Islamabad, and therefore, in context, we also have something to answer for. Wouldn't Pakistan have a bit more credibility if it also admitted to its support of militancy in Kashmir?
Not at all. The reason is that the Pulwama incident to which you are referring has nothing to do with Pakistan. When you push such a huge population to the wall, what will they do? What route now? See what's going on in Indian occupied Kashmir now. The population of 9 million has literally been, the whole Kashmir has been turned into a jail. So what will you do? The people in Kashmir, India is pushing them to become a suicide bombers. India is pushing them to become to terrorists. So when you push such a huge population, when you have 10, every 10 Indian occupied Kashmir, on every 10 people, we have one Indian army officer there, one Indian army soldier there. So what you expect from them? The whole population,
I want to ask Ajay about that.
A terrorist.
So Ajay, especially...
we have to differentiate between the freedom fighters and the terrorists.
Okay, and that's where the two
the
nations...
whole population cannot be terrorist.
Certainly, that's where the two nations...
That means the state is terrorist.
Yeah, that's where the two nations, differ greatly, right? Ajay Shukla, we have the two narratives, right? We have the narrative from New Delhi, which is saying that this is foreign-sponsored. And we have a narrative from Islamabad saying, well, of course, if you cage people, they are going to react. It has nothing to do with Pakistan. These are people from within the valley who have legitimate grievances, and they're taking extreme measures, even if it means resorting to terrorism. Are we seeing any suggestion in New Delhi or within Indian society where they're looking at it and saying maybe this is a homegrown problem and maybe it has less to do with Pakistan?
No, I don't think there's any recognition of that at all. And things are not made at all easier for the Kashmiris because of the kind of Pakistani rhetoric that you just heard just now. The fact of the matter is that Kashmir is an identity problem, a political problem, a problem that has existed since 1948 or thereabouts. And that is a problem that New Delhi has to solve in consonance with the Kashmiri people if it wants Kashmir to return to normalcy. But there is also the Pakistani dimension to it, and that can hardly be underplayed. Pakistan, as everybody knows, has supported the Kashmir insurgency. The Kashmir insurgency, I again add in the interests of fairness, has a strong homegrown component, but an equally strong cross-border component that allows it to sort of continue and get support and arms and ammunition and training and so on. Now the problem is that because of the Pakistani dimension and the Pakistani support, the Indian public can easily be sold the narrative by successive governments that this is an entirely Pakistan problem. If Pakistan were to just step back and let the problems fester on its own, I think there would be a greater recognition within India that there is a homegrown dimension to this problem. But Pakistan wants to keep sort of fishing in troubled waters. It wants to inflame the insurgency. It believes it's a very good tactic to tie down a large chunk of the Indian army and bleed India by 1,000 cuts. And it, truth be told, it is succeeding in that. India has the Indian government, and I don't just refer to this government, I talk about successive governments. They've played into Pakistani hands by imposing sort of strong repressive measures in Kashmir. That has allowed Pakistan to gain credibility. But when you have people like Muzzammil getting up and saying, Kashmiris are not Indian citizens, I would only remind him gently that the Article 370 that all Kashmiris are now saying should be brought back actually frames the contours of how Indians, how Kashmiris are citizens of India, and the constitutional framework for being so.
Okay, so Muzzammil, we know what you want.
I would just remind Muzzammil about that.
Okay, but Muzzammil, we know what you want. You want an independent Kashmir. But isn't Ajay making a fair point that as things stand right now, if you live in the valley, you're a citizen of India? That's why there's an impasse.
By occupation, I mean, we keep on forgetting that this is a de facto, that has become now a de jure occupation. We cannot forget what happened in 1947. If we're going to go back to history to 1948, I don't want to turn this into a historical debate or a history lesson for people, but 1947, the disputed nature of the Kashmir, the partition, and then obviously the instrument of accession, which is also again disputed. I mean, there are so many flaws in the argument to say that no, we are citizens of India, be it de facto or de jure. Nobody wants to be. There was no suggestion or recommendations by the people of Kashmir. There was no consultation with the people of Kashmir when it came to revoking Article 370 and 35A. There has never been any involvement of the leadership inside Kashmir, and that leadership does not mean Mehbooba Mufti or Farooq Abdullah or Umar Abdullah. I'm talking about the legitimate representatives of the people of Kashmir, which are the Hurriyat Conference, the JRL, the Joint Resistance Leadership. That includes Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani, Muhammad Yasin Malik, and Mir Waiz Muhammad Umar Farooq, which you people have recognized as people that are party to this issue. You cannot keep on banging on about a false narrative that these are our people, we need to protect them, we need to give them development. You must ask the people of Kashmir what they want. And the only thing that they want is complete freedom from Indian occupation.
Okay, so Ajay Shukla, the point that was made earlier on as well, even those who bought into the goal to have a semblance of autonomy and freedom and so on under the Indian umbrella, the pro-India politicians, as was mentioned, Umar Abdullah, his father Farooq Abdullah, Mehbooba Mufti, former chief ministers and so on, they were also under arrest during this crackdown. So what's the message to Kashmiris? Even if you want to be absorbed in the system with more autonomy and rights, we don't see you as having any relevance or legitimacy.
Imran, this can be called only a blunder by New Delhi to actually lump together the anti-India politicians, the pro-India politicians, the separatists, the unionists, to lump them all up together, tar them with the same brush, arrest them at the same time, means that India has been left effectively without a constituency in Kashmir, and all these leaders, Umar Abdullah, Mehbooba Mufti and many others who have carried the Indian flag in Kashmir for years, in many cases at the peril of their lives, have now been tarred with the same brush, and India has lost them. This is whoever has thought up this scheme and implemented it from New Delhi's thing can only be said to have not thought it through properly. It's brought all of Kashmir together. It's got a common narrative now of Indian repression, of Indian betrayal in revoking Article 370, of sort of completely sort of doing down the Kashmiri people by bifurcating the state and making it into union territories. It's been handled in the worst possible way. So you're not going to find me justifying this at all.
Okay, and I want to bring in Fawad Hussain in a moment. You have a lot to respond to. But first, I want to ask Muzzammil, very basically, when a lot of people look at Kashmir from the outside, they say, well, if you're anti-Indian, you must necessarily be pro-Pakistan. Is that the case with you, Muzzammil?
Absolutely not. At the moment, the current narrative is, as it always has been, we need freedom from the occupation of India. We need freedom to decide our own fate. We want the United Nations resolutions. We want the implementation of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. We want the implementation of the Geneva Convention, which India have time and again broken. It isn't about this pro-Pakistan narrative or anti-Pakistan narrative, or even a pro-India or pro-anti-India narrative. The ultimate deal, or rather the ultimate ideology that exists, is right to self-determination, mandated by the United Nations, as we all know, but also signed by India. They are party to this conflict, as is Pakistan. There may be people inside Kashmir or in the diaspora that support Pakistan. There even may be those that support India. But ultimately, we can't know what the people want, what the actual people want, until you hold that plebiscite in a referendum, promised to the people of Kashmir. The longer India denies this opportunity to the people of Kashmir, the worse the situation in Kashmir is going to get. We've seen people getting more and more violent. And that is not because they are acting against India. It is because they are reacting against India. They are reacting against the more than 900,000 military personnel, armed personnel inside Kashmir for a population of less than 10 million. We've seen the more than 120 different articles being written just by the New York Times in the last 2 months, which has never happened before. We've seen BBC, Al Jazeera, even TRT reporting unprecedentedly in regards to Kashmir. It isn't about the Pakistani narrative. It is about the people's voice, which has always been suppressed by the people of India. And if Pakistan's role has been anything inside Kashmir, it is only to be an elder brother, to advocate for the cause of Kashmir, the same cause that India consistently always deny exists.
Fawad Hussain, when Prime Minister Imran Khan says, and I quote, "The Pakistani nation will not sit back until Kashmiris are given their right of self-determination, whatever be the cost." What does he mean? What's the end game here? Is Pakistan willing to go to war again with India over Kashmir?
Well, we have already fought 3 wars, and we can fight in the war. There's no problem with that. So if you impose war on us, obviously we have to fight that out. And by standing with people of Kashmir, we are standing with people of Kashmir for 7 decades now. We will stand for them. They are our kith and kin. They are our blood. They are, we have a relationship with them, and we feel them as a part of ourselves, and they feel us a part of themselves. So obviously we stand with them. There is no doubt about that. But right now, I would say, and Muzzammil has actually summarized it so well, this is an issue that we want the people of Kashmir to have the right to express their opinion. Whatever they want, we will welcome that. Now, as Arundhati Roy said, that earlier it was India who was occupying Kashmir. Now it's the Kashmir that is occupying Indian narrative. The problem with Indian leadership right now is they have primarily, obviously, if you ask me, I don't even see it with a problem in the larger lens. It probably is not an Indian problem. It is more a problem of Hindu extremists who are ruling India right now. Prime Minister Modi actually represents RSS philosophy, and RSS philosophy is obviously they take their philosophy from Nazism and Hitler, and they are trying to impose their fascist ideology on Kashmir now. And it is not only this is not the first. Kashmir is not the first territory they exercise this philosophy. Earlier they did this in Gujarat. Now the problem is, and if you are saying that Pakistan is trying to foster the movements in Kashmir, we can foster movements in Assam also. We can foster movements in Punjab also. In India, there is the war is going on almost in every region. But unfortunately, instead of trying to settle down their own country, instead of trying to and what we, if you see Prime Minister Imran Khan's policy, what more could have done for the peace? Even when Prime Minister has not taken the oath, he said, "You take 1 step, we will take 2 steps." At the time of this, close to Gujranwala, when we have this the Sikh monument preparations, Kartarpur, at that point, Prime Minister Imran Khan said that past is to learn and not to live.
Okay.
So let's come on and
now there's a test of his leadership.
Forward.
Okay,
Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Right, now it's a huge test of everybody's leadership. Ajai Shukla, from your perspective, do you trust the Pakistani leadership in how it has responded over the past 2 months?
I don't think there is a lot of trust in India about the Pakistani leadership. There is this whole narrative of saving the Muslims in Kashmir and India being a fascist country, Hindu dictatorship and so on. The fact of the matter is that despite the problems that the minorities, especially the Muslim minorities, have faced in India, they are still there in numbers. There are more Muslims in India today than there were at the time of partition. In Pakistan, the minorities have gone down from 20% or thereabouts to just 2%. It's become a 98% Muslim country. So to find Pakistan sticking up for the minorities is a little rich, especially as President Trump and his spokespeople have said. There's a lot of talk about safeguarding the Kashmiri Muslims, but nothing about the Uyghur Muslims, which China is sort of repressing. So I don't think Pakistan commands a lot of respect or the belief that it will ever play a positive role. But the most damaging thing that Pakistan has done is not to be able to damage India in any substantive way, but to give India an excuse, to give Indian hardliners the excuse to take a hard stance against Kashmir, to implement measures like the cancellation of 370. In that sense, it has damaged India by damaging the secular fabric, because India is gradually becoming, as many people say, a mirror image of Pakistan.
Okay, Ajay, I've got to wrap now. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Ajay Shukla, Muzzammil, Ayyub, Thakur, Chaudhry, Fawad, Hussain.
One thing.
Listen, Chaudhry, Fawad, we're live. Unfortunately, I've got to wrap. We'll invite you back on the show sometime soon. We're going to keep a close eye on the situation in Kashmir. I thank you all for joining us here on this edition of The Newsmakers. And thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.